Hi there, this is Professor Eric Steinhardt. This is Nietzsche talking about Dionysius from some selections in the Will's Power book. This video is made primarily for my Philosophy 4040 class, my Nietzsche seminar, because we are having a snow day today. So today, right now in this video, we're going to talk about Dionysius. And let's start with WP section 1052. So this section is titled The Two Types, Dionysius and the Crucified. Well, let's get right into it. I'm going to start with the third paragraph, quote, Dionysius versus the Crucified. There you have the antithesis. It is not a difference in regard to their martyrdom, it is a difference in the meaning of it. End quote. So what is this talking about? Well, Dionysius was a Greek god. One of the stories of Dionysius is that Dionysius would be torn to bit by women in these orgies of sexual ecstasy. They would all have sex. Dionysius is a fertility god, also a god associated with plant life, the cycle of the seasons, plants dying and rising, also animal fertility, right? Animals getting pregnant, giving birth. The circle of life, Dionysius is a dying and rising god associated with blood, cannibalism, sexual orgiastic rituals of fertility and destruction. The one way of portraying these rituals, Dionysius has sex with these women, gets all the women pregnant through this sexual act pretty much instantaneously, and then they're in ecstatic frenzy. These women rip him apart and they consume his flesh. So this is the Dionysian orgy. It is, Dionysian elements appear in Christian theology, right? The story of Christ. Okay, Christ is crucified. Dionysius is a martyr. He's destroyed, but he rises again. It's just like Christ, right? Christ is crucified and rises again. And in the Christian communion meal, people eat the body of Christ and drink the blood of Christ. This is very similar to the Dionysian mythologies. And so, of course, some people have said that the Christian story comes partly from the Dionysian story, right? Whether that's true or not is immaterial for our purposes, right? Nietzsche is contrasting Dionysius versus the crucified, Dionysius versus Jesus. So what's different is not their martyrdoms. They're both martyrs in this sense. What's different is what does their crucifixion or martyrdom mean? So here's the quote to continue. Life itself, its eternal fruitfulness and recurrence creates torment, destruction, the will to annihilation. That's the Dionysian case, right? The other case, suffering. I'm quoting. The crucified as the innocent one counts as an objection to life, as a formula for its condemnation. End quote. So there's two ways to look at this, right? Okay, the Dionysian way, thinks of the eternal return of the same, eternal recurrence, life, birth, death, the circle of life, which involves torment, destruction, the will to annihilation, but also birth, right? New life, also striving for higher values and creativity. Right? But this wheel has two sides, light and dark, creation and destruction, pleasure and pain, love and hate. But the Dionysian way is to affirm this. This is life. That's what life means. That's what life has to be. The other case, the crucified, right, is an objection to life. This life is horrible. This life we're fallen. We fell into sin from some other state, or we fell into our bodies, our pure souls, right? It's a formula for the condemnation of life. Nietzsche doesn't like that. So let's continue, and I quote, one will see that the problem is that of the meaning of suffering, whether a Christian meaning or a tragic meaning. In the Christian case, it is supposed to be the path to a holy existence. In the Dionysian case, just being itself, is counted as holy enough to justify even a monstrous amount of suffering. End quote. I interpolate the being itself, but I'll quote this again. In the Dionysian case, quote, being is counted as holy enough to justify even a monstrous amount of suffering. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is nothing, non-being. You say like, oh, suffering is horrible. All the animals that died in evolution, the war of all against all. Then there would be no life at all. And a world with life struggling beautifully, violently, shining out, right, achieving great value is greater than a sterile world. Because that's your alternative. If you don't want there to be suffering and death, you get a sterile rock. The earth is a rock. It's dead. Right? If life itself requires suffering, then to affirm life is to affirm suffering and death. And is to affirm injustice. It's to affirm evil. That doesn't mean that you want there to be evil. To say that it's affirm it, it's to say that you understand. Right? This is theodicy. Theodicy doesn't say, it's evodicity, as Dawkins calls it, justification of evolution. You understand that it has a dark side. And you don't say that the dark side means the whole show is horrific. Right? Nietzsche is really the first to try to look at this issue. And let me continue with the quote, to quote this passage. Quote, the tragic man, that's the Dionysian man, quote, affirms even the harshest suffering he is sufficiently strong, rich, and capable of deifying to do so. The Christian denies even the happiest lot on earth. The Christian is sufficiently weak, poor, disinherited to suffer from life in whatever form he meets it. End of quote. And now Nietzsche's going to finish this up with some striking phrases. Let me quote this. Quote, the God on the cross is a curse on life, a signpost to seek redemption from life. Dionysius cut to pieces is a promise of life. It will be eternally reborn and return again from destruction. End quote.